Hey guys, this is Dave with ImproveBackpacking.com. It's a station or a channel, a YouTube channel where we dive deep into the research behind backpacking and how to keep the new and intermediate backpacker safe when out on the trail. So the question that we are trying to answer today is how do we stay warm in a tent without electricity? So I wrote a blog post recently. It is called 15 Ways to Heat a Tent Without Electricity. So it's important to know that we need to stay warm when we're in our tent. We need to stay dry. It's important to not carry anything into your tent that a bear might smell. So that's a discussion for another day. But let's talk about heat and how to heat a tent without electricity. So the first thing is we have to know that there are three types of heat. There's conduction, radiation, and convection. For the most part, we're not going to talk about convection. There is one way to heat a tent without electricity that requires convection, and convection is when you take a liquid and heat it into a gas, and that provides heat. So we're going to look at that a little bit later, but for the most part, we have conduction and radiant heat. Conduction is when heat is transferred from one surface to another surface. For example, when you are laying down on a heated blanket, the blanket has the heat and it conducts it onto your body to help keep you warm, right? The radiant heat is when a heat source emanates or radiates heat from that heat source into the air, and then that's where the air gets heated, and that's what touches your skin or your body to keep you warm. I look at these heating as they don't always come just one or the other. They're coupled. We get into that a little bit more deeply in the blog post. But if one form of heat can dispel heat in a number of different ways. So we will go through I'm going to quickly go through the type of heat and what are the non-electric ways to stay to keep heated. But I do want you to look at the blog post because we go into it in more depth. That I will leave a link in the description below so that you can go to that after. So radiant heating. The first example is using a Mylar blanket. If you're not familiar with that, if you've ever gone to a marathon and you see the people wearing the silver blankets or the silver sheets after the race, that's a Mylar blanket, and it's designed to it provides heat in a couple different ways. One, the heat from the sun will heat up the blanket, and that blanket holds that heat, and it will radiate that heat in towards the person, actually out and in. You can't control which way. Some of them have a backing, so it primarily radiates inward. So that would be a form of radiation. However, as that blanket heats, it also touches our skin or our clothing, which touch our skin, which conducts the heat as well. So there's a couple different ways that works, and that it does a decent job of keeping the heat that you have inside of you, your body heat. It also helps keeps you warm because it provides a protective layer that doesn't have the heat escape like going through clothing. Our heat will radiate out and will cool us off. That's kind of how we're designed, but in a situation where we need to maintain our body heat, the Mylar blanket helps protect us a little bit. The next one that I wrote is heat rocks or heating rocks. This one you have to be careful with because a lot of the rocks, when they get overheated, can explode, which can be a big problem. They will get so hot, and the water inside of them will basically need to dissipate, and the rock will explode. We in New England, it's a very rocky area, and while I haven't read anything as far as heat rocks getting anybody, what I found is if you are hiking in a rocky, I'll call it shale, like all those really small, sharp rocks that maybe are coming down off the mountain and there's a big pile of them, as it crosses the path. In the morning, well, let's back up. At night, those rocks will cool off, okay? When they cool off, then in the morning, the sun hits them. And because dew and water has gotten into those rocks and around those rocks, you'll start to hear cracking. And you'll hear, noise. You'll hear some cracking. You might see some of the rocks kind of move a little bit. And that's basically from they gain the heat during the day and then they cool off at night. And that difference will change the water from a liquid to a gas, and it'll need to escape and crack away. So I'm not too familiar with that, so if somebody has issue with how I've explained it, please let us know in the comments below. So heating up a rock can help by conducting and radiating, conducting heat if it's up next against you, which depending on how warm the rock gets, I wouldn't advise that. You don't want to get burnt, but keep putting it close to you. The rock is going to radiate heat to you, so that's a good idea. Using feet and hand warmers. These are when there's a chemical change that happens when you open up these little packets of feet and hand warmers to the air, and what happens is the release of energy from that chemical reaction. I've explained it better in the blog post, but what that does is that will conduct heat by placing it up next to you. I wouldn't put it directly on your skin, but my kids use it, in their socks. They put them in their gloves. They can hold on to them if it's not too hot, but maybe between a mitten and a glove, or a glove and a mitten, so that those feet and hand warmers will conduct some heat. They also get a little, they radiate a little bit of heat, but not a great deal. So I wouldn't rely on the radiant heat in that case. Pure radiation is from a candle, or radiant heat is from a candle, because a candle will burn. The wick burns and the heat goes out into the air. Candles have been known to raise the temperature of a tent. I believe it's 10 to 15 degrees. Don't quote me on that. I did write it in our blog post, whatever the true number is. But that will help on extremely cold days. But you have to be really careful that you don't fall asleep while the candle is burning, or it's in a place where it's not gonna tip over and burn down your tent. Then you'll receive a lot of radiant heat for a very short period of time, not with a good end. So the other thing, which is kind of cheating, is a radiant form of heat, is a tent safe heater. There are some small tent heaters that are out there. They're portable. They act similar to the feet and hand warmers, but they still they add a weight. So they're better probably for camping, as opposed to carrying them out into the wilderness, unless you feel that it's really important. It's going to be extra cold, and you can handle carrying that extra weight. So they are portable. People use them in different ways. Okay, so as far as conduction heating, we're going to look at conduction. when you lay down in your sleeping bag on your sleeping pad, the pad, your foam pad can act as a conductor. Basically, you fill it with heat from your body, and then it will conduct heat back into you. It basically stores heat, and it more traps heat than conducting it, because unless you're using an electric blanket, which you're not, because the name of this post is how to heat yourself up without the use of electricity. But if you're in a camping situation and you use an electric blanket, that's definitely going to conduct heat. Old-fashioned hot water bottles, you can fill those up with hot water. They are used, in camping situations, more in a going car camping versus an out backpacking, because of the excess weight that you may or may not want to carry. Eating a high-calorie meal acts as a conductor and a radiator, and basically, as you eat, when you eat a very filling meal, your body actually will heat up because of that, and it's important to know that you become the conductor and you are radiating heat, but what we want something to keep that heat in. We don't want to just radiate it, conduct and radiate out. We need our sleeping bags and sleeping pads and the tent to keep the heat in once we conduct it. But I've done that, or I've benefited from that on a number of times when out camping. That it keeps you warm well into the night if you eat a big meal. The flip side of that is sometimes people eat big meals and then can't fall asleep. So you have to weigh that one out. Be careful to not overeat, but eating, a high calorie meal is something you could do. The next one is Cuddle Up Buttercup. I knew I'd trip over that one. Basically, when you're in a tent with your husband, wife, partner, then you laying close together can conduct heat from one to the other, and vice versa, and is a good way to stay warm in certain situations. My wife and I do have two tents that we can put together, so we can lay next to each other and cuddle up to keep warm. Her need more than mine. I become the conductor and she becomes the receiver of my heat. So you can also bring the dog along. Dogs conduct heat just like humans. They tend to want to sleep with you when you're in a tent, and so they will provide heat to you and you'll give it back to them. So it's a win-win situation. Doing light exercises before you go to bed. This is one of those heat sources where, as you are trying to thermoregulate, you may perspire, so you don't want to heat up your body too much by doing, too many light exercises. So that can be a conductor. You're conducting heat from your body, you're radiating it out, and for a prolonged period of time after you do some light exercises. But then there's also a form of convection where you will sweat and the sweat evaporates, so liquid to gas, and that is a form of convection. But I don't advise on having you heat up so much that you start to sweat. That's not a good idea. Then the other aspect is trapping heat. For the most part, we are conductors. There's heat sources like we talked, but then when we do have that heat, we need to trap it. Sleeping bag covers on a very cold night can help with that. Using a balaclava or other, gloves, mittens, keeping your socks on, and then also the appropriate low temperature sleeping bag. You don't want to go into the summer using a -20 bag when it's going to be 60 degrees in that tent. You're gonna fry up. So finding the right one. The other thing is there are moisture absorbers. They call them desiccants, which can help to absorb some of the humidity that's in the air. The humidity helps to carry, it can carry the heat, it can also carry the cold. Trying to get the dry out the tent the best you can is a way to help regulate the heat in the tent a little bit better. So with that, we have a nice blog post that gets into this more thoroughly. First couple things are, house cleaning. Give us a thumbs up if you like this. Subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification bell, and check out our website at improvedbackpacking.com. I will include a link to this blog post, or what we're referring to in this video, the blog post that goes with it. I'll include that as well. And then, as always, be kind to one another, whether in word or in action. Have a great time out on your backpacking trip, and be safe.